Welcome to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein, talking about the evolutionary, the revolutionary, the inspiration and the perspiration, and those aha moments that change everything. And now, here's your host, Rich Goldstein.
Rich Goldstein here, host of the Innovations and Breakthroughs podcast, where I feature top leaders and the path they took to create change. Past guests include Joe Polish, Ryan Dice, and Thomas Shipley. This episode is brought to you by my company, Goldstein Patent Law, where we help you to protect your ideas and products. We've advised and obtained patents for thousands of companies over the past 29 years. So if you're a company that has software, a product, or a design you want protected, go to goldsteinpatentlaw.com, where there are amazing free resources for learning about the patent process. You can email my team at welcome@goldsteinpc.com to explore if it's a match to work together. You could also check out the book I wrote for the American Bar Association that explains in plain English how patents work. It's called the ABA Consumer Guide to Obtaining a Patent. I have with me here today Reuben Hendell. Reuben is an expert in tactical marketing, growth, and M&A. After a series of successful exits and a successful career operating businesses, Reuben now helps companies from a very early stage and sets them on the right path towards scaling, building value, and eventually exiting. He's a partner at Madison Alley Global Ventures, and I'm happy to welcome Reuben Hendell to the podcast. Welcome, Reuben.
Thanks, Rich. Happy to be here.
Cool. So I happen to know that you started out in sales, and I love sales. So tell me about how that all happened and really what it was like to start your business career in sales.
Sure, thanks. I actually got some very early advice. I was working in a ski shop, actually. I'm a passionate skier, still a passionate skier, and was actually selling skis on 57th Street in Manhattan in high school, actually, and then in college as well, and was seeking advice because I wasn't actually planning on being in sales my whole career. I wanted to go into marketing, eventually be a little more strategic, but I was given advice by several slightly older, trusted relatives and contacts who said, well, but if you want to go into marketing, you have to really know what it's like to sell, but not sell skis. You have to know what it's like to get somebody's signature on a contract. That's everything. And I really didn't have a lot of context at that point, so I took that advice. And so when I graduated from college, instead of going right to graduate school or instead of trying to jump right into, actual strategic marketing, which I eventually spent my career in, I actually went and found a sales program at the time. IBM, AT&T, and Xerox offered some of the deepest and most what they would call consultative type selling training programs. And so I took the advice, again, of lots of folks giving me input and went into sales at the time for AT&T.
Awesome. And so what do you think some of the things are that you learned by selling that really helped you in the next stage when you got into tactical marketing?
Yeah, I think it didn't only help me in marketing, it kind of helped me in life, Rich. I would say that and there was some very rigorous training going on that really helped me understand this. But I think very simply what it taught me was to listen and to really spend the time engaging with somebody you're selling to, or just somebody you're working with, really starting by listening, trying to feel those folks out for what their interests are, try and get a little sense for what their context is, and really kind of gear whatever kind of discussions one was going to have in those contexts, around who I was with. So kind of really tailoring the moment and the message, subsequently the marketing, but the moment and the message to based on an understanding of who you're in the room with and what that interpersonal relationship is.
Yeah, and I guess that carries forward to all types of deals, right? Like it's if you can listen to someone and really get their context, then it doesn't matter if you're selling something for a few $1,000s or you're doing $100 million or even $1 billion deal, right? Like it all starts with having someone feel heard, like listened to.
It all starts with that. Yeah. And in the sales context, honestly, your ability to persuade and be passionate about your ideas or passionate about what you're selling, whether you're selling ideas or selling a pair of skis or whatever it is, your ability, to understand who you're trying to persuade, right, to get your point across is massively important. If you can actually get into that mode, be comfortable talking about things and you're trying to accomplish, while at the same time spending as much time thinking about who you're talking to and what they're thinking about, it really puts you at a significant advantage in dealing with people and being able to, at the end of the day, not just selling, but persuading people to ideas.
Absolutely. And so I guess you move into marketing was about kind of persuading from one to many, right? Like from one to one. Sometimes they call it belly to belly sales, right? To finding ways to convey a message to large amounts of people. And I think you were involved at the very early stages or the very early times of digital marketing. Is that fair?
You are correct. My colleagues and I started one of the first digital agencies the year of the founding of the browser in 1995. Let's all not do the math, please. And we were there from kind of day one. And we all kind of came from this background of what used to be called database marketing. So there used to be kind of advertising and database marketing, right? And advertising is what most people still know today. It's kind of like TV and a little less print now, but TV, radio, those kinds of one-way mediums. We were actually grounded in what's called direct marketing, where we use direct mail and telemarketing to get messages to subsets of audiences, right? Hence the direct. And really, the way we looked at digital marketing was in the same context of now we just had this incredible tool set to interact with consumers, again, in defined and targeted ways, but through a variety of digital mediums, whether it be a website or email or ultimately social and those types of things. So it's really kind of a continuation of targeting messages to segments of folks. Of course, the internet really enabled two-way conversations that made it kind of very cool.
Yeah, that's funny. It's I had I don't know if you know Kevin Lee from Did It. So Kevin,
Not sure.
I went to college with Kevin, and basically, he got a job from out of college at McCann Erickson, and in 1994, he came to my office with this great, Oh, well, by the way, for those who don't know, McCann Erickson, huge advertising agency on Madison Avenue. I don't know if it still exists, but it was one of the biggest. And he came to me and my best friend with this idea that he was going to start an internet marketing agency in 1994. And we just laughed. I mean, we were like, yeah, nobody's going to spend any money on the internet. So I kind of proudly tell a story about how I just totally got that one wrong. But that was around the same time. And, he went on to grow this company, Did It. There was an SEM agency. I think maybe they up to 500 employees at a certain point. And,
Wow.
I just kind of continued along with my law practice thing, kind of as a small business person. But yeah, it was just interesting how I totally missed that trend. And, I love to tell that story because it's, fun to laugh about now.
Yeah.
How rough I was.
Well, we certainly didn't know it was going to work. That's for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, no, absolutely. But that's great. And you operated a bunch of businesses, you grew a bunch of businesses, and that had exits to kind of major household name companies. And I guess through that experience, you came interested in helping other businesses to exit or help them through their growth. Um,
Yeah, I had a series of Zelig type moments in my career. Some luck, some, luck is the well prepared, whatever those were. So I had a great kind of series of different types of moves to different types of companies. Ran eBay's marketing services businesses for several years. Actually built McCann's digital agency. Funny that you say that.
hmm.
Called MRM Worldwide. I spent 6 years doing that. Then also started to incorporate some of the e-commerce aspects to digital, right? If you just will, incorporating transactions in the flow of digital communications. I would say through it all, and I was lucky enough for three of those four, the last three of the four, to have the CEO role and title. And as you well know, and I'm sure your listeners know, that's really a role as much about leadership as anything else. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed leading people, managing people, and mentoring people, very specifically working with kind of some of the most senior management in the companies. And along the way, I both sold businesses, but I also acquired a lot of businesses into the businesses I was running, divested some businesses. So I had a lot of transactional experience, with smaller types businesses that we would buy to augment our capabilities or those types of things. So when I kind of decided that, if you will, the burden and joy, but the goal of running these big companies was, after doing it for 30 years or so, it's kind of enough. I kind of decided to sort of focus on those two areas, as you're kind of saying. One, focus on mentorship, but also focus on mentorship with helping some of these independent sized businesses, prepare themselves better strategically, operationally for eventual exit.
Absolutely. And is that the nature of the work that you do at Madison Alley?
Yeah, precisely. So we have, lots of folks that once we have what we call a mandate, once we, companies decide they want to work with us, that kind of execute some of those aspects of the deal. And, that's a lot of banking activity, et cetera. Where my role really comes in is kind of twofold. One is kind of to be out there and available and present for CEOs and founders to be able to reach out all along the cycle of where they are, as we were talking about, right? So I really encourage, and this is kind of one of the things we're doing somewhat uniquely, is I'm really encouraging conversations that you could almost say should start maybe when exit isn't a glimmer, but at least 3 to 4 years out for when your company might be ready, or when you might be ready, or when it might even make sense, right? As early as possible, just because there's so many things about a business and how it develops that when you do get to market, you kind of, all you do is you look back and you look how you prepared. And the amount of folks that both I had personal experience with when I was running these companies and buying some of these agencies, but now just on a much larger, more frequent scale, talking to folks, the realization is you can't go back and change the previous 3 to 4 years. Yet, pretty much that's what folks are looking at when they're evaluating your business for scale. So, kind of like, doesn't take a rocket science to go, well, if we could start talking about, and making the right plans. And of course, the plans aren't exclusively about how to optimize for exit. They're about creating value, right? They're about creating value in a better business, because those are the things that people want to acquire eventually.
It's really one and the same, right? It's like,
it is one and the same.
Setting up your business for exit is creating a business that's optimized.
Exactly. So how do you optimize? And certainly, if there's lots of choices for how you optimize, right? So certainly on the margin, having a view towards contextually what will appreciate the most, what will be most valuable in the market down the road, this path versus that path. Those can be small decisions. Those can be big decisions. So we're really trying to change the nature of the process. And I personally spend a lot of time with folks that might be multiple years out. And I'm, sort of happy to give my time to them strategically. And there's a bunch of different ways that we interact along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so your department there at Madison Alley, like you said, one of the innovative things you're doing is speaking with them at an early stage. Like what are other ways you feel in which you're innovating how this process goes?
Yeah. So, I mean, speaking with them at an early stage is sort of a very broad context. Actually, what we've created, or what I've created really in the practice as an operating partner, is to really try and structure advice and guidance for some of these companies along the way. So as an example, many of these founders and entrepreneurs, who many of them which are very successful and actually even have significantly sized 100, 200, 300, 400 person companies, might not have a board, as an example, might not have a board of advisors, might have some informal advisors, but often they don't have a board of advisors. And more often than not, you talk to these folks and they're pretty lonely in terms of what they do and how they do. And there are some great associations out there like YPO and things like that people do tap into, which I think is fantastic, where they get support. But at the end of the day, a lot of folks don't have somebody just to talk to as a peer, maybe somebody as a mentor, right, that has some of this experience that they haven't had yet. And so again, it takes time to develop those kinds of relationships, and it's not for everybody. But I found myself often kind of serving in that role, and then that starts to create structures like monthly check-ins or quarterly day of almost a faux board meeting, kind of looking at the company the way a board would look at the company and review it on a quarterly basis. And so you get into there are different kind of ways to do it depending on the situation and the aptitude, but for the right kind of situation, I'm really encouraging and providing that kind of time and guidance for them based on what they need and based on what's going to be most effective.
And of course, it varies from situation to situation and company to company. But what kind of trends do you notice in terms of like what are the common weaknesses you spot in terms of the way in which they've set up their business, what needs to be developed to create that value that will be recognized when they're exiting, and also to create an optimal business? Like what are the common things that you think?
Yeah. So, and these again are service businesses basically, and in the marketing services, digital marketing services world, there's probably 10, 20, if you will, almost sub lines of business. Do I focus on organic search? Do I focus on paid search? Do I focus on building websites? Do I focus on analytics? Those types of things. And, often the answer is yes to all of those. But the kind of question is, firstly, where are you as a business? What do you hope to be competitive with? How can you scale? And when you look at it at let's call it a value proposition level, where are the things that you have an opportunity to be most successful? What are those things going together? And so what I find is, sometimes there's not as much thought about that, kind of as you might think, and people kind of are going where they're being led, and that's okay if the market's leading you, but it's also okay to say no, right? Very often agencies grow by doing 5 things, and then somebody asks them to do a 6th thing. And they say, well, sure, somebody's willing to do it, right? And then somebody else asks them to do the 7th thing, and all of a sudden they're doing 15 things,
right?
And they don't have the scale maybe to do those 15 things. So as an example, folks need to really take a look at that and have some discipline there. And what I would say is, sort of in its better case, a lot of the folks I start working with, that is where they're focused. But there are so many other aspects. Another kind of key aspect is really understanding that for potential buyers, as an example, the clients that you have, the client mix that you have, the client concentration of revenue that you have with particular clients ends up being hugely important, right? The cash flow of these businesses, by definition, flow through the client, the B2B client relationships that they have, right? Where they're doing marketing with these clients on, and they might be marketing consumers or other businesses, but the nature of this is, right, you've got 20, 30, 40 clients that are fueling 100% of your business. What is the mix? What does that look like? Are you being strategic about that? I find that, again, it's a tough world, and growing an agency is not easy, and it's a very competitive environment. So naturally, people will almost take everything they can into that, and then things sort of start to get a life of their own. But having some discipline, but then the punchline is down the road, they might have a couple of clients that are 40, 50% of the overall revenue. and then lots of little clients that aren't necessarily maybe even that valuable, and if some could almost be looked at as a distraction. So like you sort of quickly see that you could look at a situation where while somebody's happy, they're growing every year, right? The way they're growing with their client mix could really not be attractive to a potential buyer who is looking for, basically a way to manage risk, right? Like clients are a portfolio of risk and revenue, and buyers are clear-eyed about that. But when you run an agency or, really any service business or any business for that matter, sort of the way you acquire clients, what they look like, what that mix is, it's not often the case. And again, if you're making something and you've got production capabilities and manufacturing, you've got lots of other assets to talk about. When you're talking about a service business, an agency business, there really aren't any other assets. The assets are the clients and the work you're doing for them, and that's the revenue. So, that's another example of where sometimes folks, because it's difficult to grow their businesses often, are kind of taking it as they come, but that's not necessarily going to work. And you've got to start to look at that and be thoughtful about that and maybe make some changes.
Yeah, so I guess when you're running a business, you could be too zoomed in, and you're like, "Well, we got another client, another hand sanitizer company. Like that's great. We're cornering the hand sanitizer marketing business, and it's not even 2021 isn't even over yet.
Right? Exactly.
Like, wait, But I guess when someone is more zoomed out, when someone is looking to acquire them, they're going to look carefully at that. Like if the clients are all concentrated in a specific industry, that's higher risk. If a lot of the work is concentrated on in a few clients, that's also higher risk. Of course, if you've got some really solid clients that are in growth industries, that could be positive, right? So I guess what you're saying is like applying another set of eyes that isn't as zoomed in as someone might be when they're the business owner running the business, looking to cover payroll, and so taking on new clients as they come. They might not notice things that you notice when you begin to look at how it's all come together from 10,000 feet.
Precisely, and I would just sort of emphasize on that point the nature of building, an independent advertising agency, tends to be very founder CEO driven, and so they can often get insulated. Even, for instance, as an example, you'd ask them about their senior team, their top team, aren't they sort of telling you what they think? And the nature of it is, typically this comes with personality, this comes with confidence, all well warranted is the case, but they don't have a lot of folks that they're looking for or willing necessarily to listen to. I mean, that's good and bad, right? They have a vision, they have a drive, they have the accountability. But one thing I've kind of always felt, and this comes from way back when, just the ability to be, analytic about your situation, and really, you need some ways to challenge what you're doing, even if things are going well, especially in this world where everything's changing so quickly. So yeah, that tends to be very helpful for folks.
Yeah, so they need to be coachable, right? They need to not think that they know it all, and be willing to listen to someone who's been there and done that, even if it's in a different context, and be coachable, willing to try on that. Maybe there's a different way of doing things, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, people have different criteria for how to be coachable. And, so often, I meet folks that just haven't interacted maybe with somebody who, hasn't fit the bill precisely. And sometimes I can fit into that slot for them well, which I'm happy to do, again, if they want to be coached. Yeah.
And in that regard, and working with a lot of kind of smaller businesses that are pretty far from a payday, and pretty far from any type of way in which I guess it could directly monetarily benefit your firm. I've heard you say before the importance to you of paying it forward. So, tell me like what that means to you.
Yeah, I mean, what it very specifically means to me is, I'm lucky enough to be at a stage in life and a career where, I'm more focused really on trying to help the next generation of leaders, than I am trying to transact a particular, get another mandate to transact a business. That doesn't mean that they don't go well together, but I'm really measuring, quite frankly, my success by the amount of impact I can make kind of pre any in market type process, and really one by one, right? How can we take these agencies, these entrepreneurs who might not have had access or been willing to kind of take in some of this advice? How can we help them, and how can I be supportive really as much as anything, right? There's the expertise and context that goes along. My experience, of course, those are all very kind of practical things that certainly can give them perspective. Yet, of course, you don't tell anybody what to do, right? You're just giving perspective. So people still need to make their choices and all of that. But the other thing I've noticed really in doing this for the last few years is that folks really appreciate the support. Just having somebody to be able to talk to about some of these issues, just having somebody that they feel comfortable talking with. And I'm proud that, certainly for some of these folks, I'm able to fill that role, because I think that it's a very hard thing to build a business. It's a very hard thing to be an entrepreneur. It's a very hard thing to find somebody or some people that you want to let in and help you, and that you're open to those things. And so again, when that match works, when that the early discussions and that match and chemistry work, and they have a need, and there's somebody who, as you so rightly said, want to be coached, and it makes sense in the situation. It's really, I'm grateful for the opportunity to help.
Yeah, I love it. And if people want to learn more about you or get in touch with you, how they go about doing so?
I'm certainly available on LinkedIn. Easy to find me there, and a fairly unique name, so not going to be too hard to pin me down. And also MadisonAlley.com. Certainly the company that I work with, I'm prominent there as well, and easy to get in touch with us in that respect.
Awesome. Well, Reuben, thanks so much for taking the time to be on the show. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the insight from all of your experience. So thank you.
Thanks for having me, Rich. Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web at innovationsandbreakthroughs.com, and we'll see you next time.